Welcome to Asking for a Friend. This is our first event for July. We are coming from lockdown, I think, in Sydney, but hopefully, the rest of you are sort of managing to get a little bit of freedom. Asking for a Friend is brought to you by Never Not Creative, Young Bloods, and Mentally Healthy. It exists because we wanted to create a safe place for where you can ask the unaskable. The questions that you're worried may change the way people treat you at work or affect the opportunities that might be given to you. So we bring together every month industry leaders and mental health professionals to give you non-judgmental responses in a safe, anonymous environment. Before I introduce our guests, a little bit of housekeeping. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a chat tab. So, feel free to just add comments in there, or you can also add emojis and they come up on the screen, which is awesome. You'll also see next to the chat tab questions. So please add your questions into the questions tab. We will get to those in the second half of the session. We've actually got quite a few that have been sent in beforehand this month. And if you need more immediate help, consider getting in touch with some of the resources that are on this link I'm about to send now in the chat. So today, obviously, is a first great step. And, a caveat around this is that everything that we do with Never Not Creative and Mentally Healthy is volunteer run. So essentially, it's unofficial, but we are a bunch of people using community to come together and tackle the challenges that our industry is facing. So with that in mind, remember that it's also anonymous. We don't have the context of where you have come from and sort of, everything else around your situation, but we'll do the best that we can as a first step of advice. If something's getting serious for you, then of course, please do go and get professional help. GP is a great first place to start. So with that housekeeping out of the way, I am delighted to welcome back, in fact, Tara Hurster. Tara's been with us before. Tara is a psychologist and the founder of the Tara Clinic, where Tara is an acronym for Therapeutic Addiction Recovery Assistance. She supports busy and successful people to regain control over substance use and addiction while leaving the guilt and the shame behind. After helping thousands of people to work through their experience of substance use, she's focused her sights now on disrupting the way we view addiction through reducing the negative stigma. Thanks for coming back, Tara.
Thank you for having me. I'm so pumped.
Great to have you back. And first time, Jasmin Bedir. Jasmin is currently the CEO of Innocean Australia, an independent Korean-owned marketing and advertising agency with 22 offices in 17 countries and over 1,600 employees. In her former life, she led big accounts in literally every form of creative agency there is, from highly creative independent hotshops to global network agencies. Jasmin grew up as a Turkish migrant child in Germany, then spent half of her career in Australia and working across multiple APAC markets. It's resulted in a great appreciation of cultural differences and the importance of local relevance. In 2021, and this is when we first came across each other, Jasmin founded Fuck the Cupcakes, an initiative aimed at the creative services industry to fight misogyny in the workplace. Thanks for joining us, Jazz.
Thank you for having me. Quite exciting to be here.
Very exciting. So, okay, we are going to crack on. We have to finish the session today at 1:25. So, as I said before, get your questions in, and we'll come to them in sort of the second half of the session. And if you have sent questions in beforehand, we'll be tackling them now. So, Tara, I'm going to come to you first. Talking to employers about invisible disabilities, when you're okay with explaining your struggles but unsure what the most appropriate time to bring it up is that won't jeopardize an interview or successful employment. And what is the limit before being perceived as oversharing when you're totally transparent about those issues and your history?
It is such a great question. And I think what kind of comes up for me is, I guess, a few points. The first thing that I'll come to is actually the last part of this question is, what's oversharing and how does that kind of work? When we think oversharing, I first think about boundaries, and boundaries are there in order to keep ourselves and other people safe. So what we can do in the early stages of a process before you get to know someone, we can talk more in general terms or perhaps a little bit more surface level. So things like, I'm trying to think of an example that's not too specific. It might be through asking questions about how an organization supports their team members who experience stress and anxiety, or what kind of mental health support do you provide your team. What you're doing there is you're, in essence, suggesting that there's something going on for you, though at the same time, you're also interviewing the organization to see if they're the right place for you. Because if you know this about yourself, that it's something that you require extra support for, it's almost unhelpful to go into an organization that doesn't really make space for that. So in terms of oversharing, I would be mindful of the level of specifics that we go into, unless they are, I guess, impactful on the actual job description, right? So, I'm thinking in like a design studio, perhaps you have a degenerative eye condition. So that might be something that, you do need to talk about. But again, that's very, very industry specific, and it's also very specific to your situations. So yeah, I guess the way that I would handle it in an early interview kind of space is asking questions to elicit the information for yourself to figure out whether or not this is the right place for you.
How about you, Jazz? Like, what happens if this comes up in an early conversation with an employee?
That is such an emotional topic for people, and I think we need to recognize that it's very difficult for them in the first place to talk about it. I think empathy there is everything, but again, I think what Tara was just saying is pretty much right on the money, right? So if this is something that you personally struggle with, or you've got something that that is not perceived as normal, as a normal functioning human being, you may want to consider how you interview that employer as well from the get-go, and make sure that it is an environment where you'll be where you can actually flourish and grow, so that you will be accepted for what you are. So that's kind of, I think I would say that to anyone with any employer, really. You don't want to work in a company where you don't flourish in the first place. But if that is another sort of added level of complexity, I think you will either naturally find an employer that you kind of feel comfortable with sharing that and say, hey, look, that's something that's not 100% right. How do you feel about it? Or if you get red sort of alarm bells right away that you go, oh, it's probably going to be difficult here in this place for me to sort of share this, it's probably a good sign then, therefore, to potentially consider another workplace, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, Andy, just to kind of pop in, because something that Jasmin just mentioned really rang true to me. And I think, if there's a situation where you notice that for yourself, you tend to overshare quite a lot, or you're told by people that you give details that maybe aren't necessarily required, then that's also a really great moment to go and seek out some professional therapy. Because when we don't have our own boundaries, I guess, sort of set for ourselves, then that tends to show up in oversharing, in kind of becoming feeling like you've sort of vomited all of the words, and then you walk out of the situation going, oh shit, what did I do? What did I say? I said too much. Oh my God. That doesn't have to be that way. That can be something that therapy can really, really help with. So I just wanted to kind of tack that on at the end. Because people sometimes don't know what therapy is actually for, and it can be for those sorts of things too.
Yeah, it's not just because you've suddenly hit dire straits. In fact, if anything, it's better to do it when you're feeling good and helping to sort of navigate the everyday. Cool. Okay, so Jazz, I'm coming to you with this next question. I've recently started as an account executive, and the workload is way less than I expected. I keep asking for more work, but don't want to appear like I'm nagging. Everyone is saying I'm doing a great job, but I want more work and responsibility. What should I do?
Well, to be honest, this is one of those questions that I've didn't think would ever happen, right? So, it's usually the poor account executives that, arrive at an agency and get like overloaded and not appreciated and poorly paid. So I wonder whether there's something a little bit deeper to this, because there must be a reason for it. And coming from the employer point of view, which is sometimes a side that you don't necessarily see when you are a junior, or even if you work at like sort of mid to senior level, even sometimes you do not know what's going on in the agency. There could be, for instance, that the agency is on the verge of losing a client. So if that happens, usually what you try to do is you try to keep everyone employed, you try to do what's best, but this might result in an immediate loss of sort of like workload, but you try to not to create a panic, right? So I'm wondering whether it could be a little bit of that, where maybe there's some financials in the background, and that's pretty much just therefore project work has potentially dried up. And then I would say to this person just to maybe just give it a little bit of time and just maybe appreciate that, or maybe just settle for a little bit. If it's about that you feel not valued as a human being, that's the most horrible feeling in the world, right? So that might be one of those things, but maybe in the interview process, it wasn't properly explained to you. Again, I think we spoke about that in the question before. I think it's really important that you interview also the employer. So what's my role going to be? What does it look like? What will I actually be doing? So you don't set yourself up for failure. Happens all the time. It's just like people are so excited to get into some sort of relationship and, a work relationship. And then all of a sudden you just go, oh God, we didn't explore this properly. Could also be that this is maybe a completely new role, and the agency is going through growth and doesn't necessarily know how to deal with that role just yet. So that's obviously clearly the fault of the employer. But again, I would just probably say this is a new role, right? So
I've recently started as an account executive. I think the other thing with that sometimes is that if you are working for someone that hasn't necessarily had a direct report before, it's quite, you often find people who have moved into roles where they do have, like new experience of manager, that then they haven't worked out how to let go yet, and be able to delegate. So I think that might be a discussion to have as well with, with the person that you report into, to see if there are things that you can take on, and how that might work. But it is definitely a symptom, I think, of sometimes people moving into new management roles and not feeling ready to delegate. Often they'll say, oh, I'll just do it because it'll be quicker.
It's quicker. It'll be quicker. I can do it so much faster, right?
Exactly. So the person you're reporting into might be grappling with that at the moment as well.
And I guess when I look at that, I think what's coming up for you to not be okay with being able to sit with the feedback that you're being given already, which is that everyone is saying that you're doing a great job. Are you really trying to prove yourself? And is there something subtly under the surface there going on for you? That sometimes it's about feeling comfortable with the discomfort of receiving feedback that's positive. Perhaps this person has come from a different organization where they weren't treated as nicely. Perhaps they were in a situation where they were overworked and underpaid, like you were saying. It seems to be the thing. These are things that if we're used to a certain thing and then we go into a new environment where that thing doesn't feel the same, it can really feel uncomfortable. Even if it's in a positive direction, it can really feel uncomfortable. I have that with clients all the time when they move into recovery. It's really uncomfortable to feel well. Yeah. So this, again, another opportunity for therapy.
That's such a great point. Okay, so we promise the tough, gritty questions in asking for a friend. And this next one, I think, delivers on that. So I'm going to come to you first, Tara, but I think obviously you'll both have a perspective on this. So should agencies be looking after the well-being of the people it fires that then face long-term unemployment?
Well, the first thing is I have a rule in the Tara Clinic that there's no shoulds, because shoulds are just sort of filled with judgment. And I think what's more helpful and effective is to look at the reality of situations. So in the event that this is coming from someone who is either top down, who is the person that's going to be letting someone go, or if it's from bottom up, so the person that may have been just let go, or had an experience of being let go and then had long-term unemployment. First of all, we really can't predict the future. So how do we know that this person is going to face long-term unemployment? Sure, COVID is a thing and it's harder to get a job now. I don't know necessarily the stats in your industry, though, for some people, finding work has been challenging over 2020. However, in terms of whether or not it's the agency's job to look after you afterwards, unless there is again, I'm not a lawyer, so I just want to really make that clear, that you need to speak to a legal representative about this if it's a thing. But really, unless there's a legal issue like a psychological injury or, unfair dismissal or those sorts of things, that Australia as a whole has a policy and a law against doing all of those things, then perhaps there might be something there where the agency has done something wrong. You've gone through the litigious process and you've come out the other side and you end up with some kind of outcome. But really, outside of that, once you're no longer in the organisation, you're not their family anymore. There are things like the EAP services that, for the most part, larger organisations usually have some kind of connection with. And an EAP service, I have no idea what EAP actually stands for, but it's
Interview Assistance Program.
Hey, there we go. Thank you. So it is a program that assists employees, and that's really what it is. It's a certain amount of sessions, either on the phone or face to face with a psychologist or a counsellor, to be able to work through either work related stuff or stuff that's happening in your personal life that's impacting on work related stuff. And my understanding is that there's a bit of a kind of buffer period after not being in the organisation any longer. So, you still have access to that. Though it's not up to the agency to force that upon anybody. We are adults and we have the capacity to make choices for ourselves. And, if there were mental health issues that led to the moving on from the organisation, then perhaps this is an opportunity to look at, okay, what could we do differently next time, ahead of time, so that we don't have to get to this end point.
Jazz, how do you feel about this one?
This is a complicated question, so I had to, kind of think about this a little bit, because well-being is a very loose term, right? It's just in the same ilk of, at the moment, defining what essential services are, really, right? Because, well-being, what is it? So I'm assuming we're talking about this in the context of mental health. That would this kind of implies that employers in general should be responsible for people's mental health, which I disagree with. I think employers should be doing whatever they can to support vulnerable people and enable them to, or people that have kind of mental health problems, to just have the same workplace or healthy relationships with co-workers and the same opportunities that everyone else, and to make sure that they're not making things worse while people are in employment. So I think that's my point of view on this one. Long-term unemployment is something that, again, I feel like that's really hard to predict, right? When people lose their job, which is horrible also on the person that has to execute that, by the way. For people that leave an organization, sometimes it feels like, oh my God, I'm never going to work again, right? And then the next minute, life is almost so much better and you found a better opportunity. I'm generalizing here, that's not happening to everyone. But I think this question in itself is making so many assumptions. Like, the way I read it, it's like the word firing is also a very complicated one in Australia, because technically you can't fire anyone for mental health reasons, and anyone that would do that, I mean, that's the most horrendous thing to do. I doubt, personally, I don't think that's an option. You can't fire mentally people that are not stable or not doing well. So I don't think this is what this is implying. So anyway, so bit of a ramble, but I think overall, no, I don't think agencies should be responsible for the long term well-being of people in general, no matter what their future career is, because, you know, I'm also now going to be in charge of the well-being of people that are going to go on to better jobs. You know, that's kind of the other side of the coin. But I think we need to do whatever we can to make sure that people are okay while they are in employment. That's our role, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely, so what you said earlier as well, of like the it's basically when it comes to like legal responsibility of employers, it's your responsibility to not make things any worse. And of course, once your employment contract ends, then you are out in the world. But I guess, you know, there's so many great communities out there. It's important to have a good support network around you, and to start to take matters into your own hands. I might use that as a very quick plug for a couple of things that we do at Never Not Creative. So we're about to launch a new circles group. So that's a mental health support group for creatives, which actually, Tara, you interviewed me for my facilitation of that group. I remember that.
That's right.
So, that's right. So I just put the links in there. And also we've launched recently Never Not Creative Walks, which is just like it's like a meetup for creatives, but it's not at the pub and it's not over alcohol, and you can do it in the morning, and you can just, we did one up in Brisbane recently, and it was just a great way of getting out and having a chat. So go check those out, and we'll be adding more soon. Okay, so next question to you, Jazz. I'm constantly getting treated badly by a client. Just this week, they've gone to my boss saying that I haven't done things that I should. They ring me out of hours. They never say thanks. How do I deal with them? Please help.
We've all had that one client. I think everyone has had that one client. That's just such a horrible position to be in. What's even worse is when you have a boss that then doesn't support you, because this is what this reads like. So for me, there's always a hierarchy in terms of the more junior you are, the least you need to be in the line of fire. That's why people above you are being paid to do their jobs, and their job is to protect you. Sometimes it's a little bit more complicated because, let's just say, imagine you're an agency, a small agency, and this is your biggest client, and that client also pays a lot of salary. So you can then imagine that management finds it particularly hard to kind of maybe pin that client down and have difficult conversations. But also clients get the agencies and the people they deserve usually, right? So if this is a horrible client, there's a fair chance that down the track, they will be found out, and not many people will want to work for them in the first place. But to answer this specifically, I think it would be the role of your line manager to pick this up and work with you on a strategy as to how you can cope with that better, or how to pick this up with a client, because it's not okay. Like, behavior like this is never okay, in particular when it's like about lying and just being a genuine sort of like a-hole. That's just something that no one should be tolerating. That sound?
That's good. That's good. I also like to do the kind of, like, ultimately everyone's human, and it might be that something is going on for like your client. You know, they might have their own mental health challenges, and so sometimes just turning back on them and go, hey, you seem a bit stressed and, you know, like erratic and, you know, combative, like, are you okay? And sometimes, yeah, just normalizing the conversation and go, look, because you probably, I find you might meet these people out and about, and you know, at a you know, and have a coffee or be at a cafe with them, and they'd be absolutely lovely people, but in work situations, sometimes, yeah, stresses can get to you.
You actually, to be honest, that's actually true. Actually remembering that I had one of those situations, and it turns down that specific client had a full relationship breakdown at home, going through a horrible period of time where the partner with the kids had moved out, etc. Yeah. And he was literally just taking it out on the relevant team member. So yeah, empathy goes both ways, and maybe probing that a little bit. I think it might still be good to get some air cover from your line manager no matter what, right? So you're never alone. I think that's always nice. Just make sure that you're never alone in these things.
Yeah, great.
And also document everything. If you document everything, then it also helps to show your manager a bit of a timeline, because if you've noticed that sometimes it's kind of like the frog in boiling water scenario. This happened way before ethics were a thing in science. But, a frog doesn't know that it's going to be boiled alive when it's slowly the temperature is rising, and then all of a sudden it's so hot in there that it dies. If that's what's going on, then it might be really hard for your manager to see that there's been a change. So if you're kind of documenting what you're noticing over the time, you can say, well, actually, it's not an isolated situation. This has been happening for this length of time, and I need your help. And I guess that's, coming back to Jaz's point, it is about knowing when to ask for help, because there is no time. Violence is always a choice, and violence is both through power and control, financial, physical violence, emotional, and verbal abuse. And, in all of those situations, it's always a choice. It doesn't matter what's going on in someone else's background. It's always a choice. So we have the responsibility as managers to provide that buffer for our team that's under us, and even if it's us and we're at the top, we can still then put in those boundaries. And while I totally agree that money is required to pay the bills, if the person that's paying the most of your salary is one client, then diversifying your portfolio is a really, really valuable thing to start looking at doing, so that you don't feel tied to an unhealthy situation.
Yeah, that's great advice. Tara, I can't feel like
Yes.
I probably caused someone to ask this question at some point, but my agency has started to introduce a bunch of wellbeing initiatives like meditation and EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and a mental health policy. But some of the stuff ends up eating into time that I need to do work, which just adds to the stress. Is there anything else they can be doing?
Well, yeah, there's a few things here. Firstly, I think about the story of Sharpen the Saw. You're walking through the forest, you find a guy that's huffing and puffing, trying to cut some trees down, and it's clear to you that his saw is blunt. And you say to him, hey, mate, if you just go and sharpen your saw, then you'll probably get through this job a lot easier. And he throws the stuff down and goes, who do you think you are? Of course I know that it's not sharp. Of course I know that if I sharpen it, it'll be easier, but I don't have time to sharpen my saw. And so what happens with that guy is, sure, he gets all of his trees cut and all the wood is cut, but it takes longer, it's harder, it's more stressful. Whereas if you'd just taken the time out, 10 minutes to sharpen his saw, it would have taken him a little bit longer in that moment to get started. However, the actual process of it was probably going to be easier. So when we think about mental health support, I kind of think of it in terms of sort of like Tetris. And when you get closer to the top, there's not as much room for things to kind of fit in before the game is over. So what you want to do is you want to keep getting all these lines at the bottom so it keeps dropping down. And that's the way that I see stress as well, and anxiety and mood management, is if we manage the stuff at a lower level, then it means that it doesn't have to creep up really high and get really tricky. So in the sense of we're not finding the time at the moment to be able to engage in these processes, sometimes it is just helpful to look at things in smaller chunks. So rather than an 1.5-hour yoga session at lunch, which, I mean, I don't know very many people that have the time to be able to do that, we could do a 5-minute breathing exercise outside under a tree, not on lockdown because you'll get $1,000 fine. However, these smaller sort of incremental upgrades are things that you can do. However, in the question around is there anything else that they can be doing? It sounds to me like these sorts of policies and services are there for people who want to engage in them. I haven't come across a situation where there's been a requirement that you engage in these sorts of things. So it could be, rather than trying to do all of the things, just do one of the things, or, one of the things once a month rather than every day. But in terms of other things that they can be doing is having communication about the culture in the organization, having a review and a revisit of how work is being sort of stepped out, kind of like what you were saying, when new managers take over and then they're not really learning how to delegate, being able to provide perhaps some more training on how to delegate, how to let go, how to manage more effectively. These are things that I guess in both the short and long term can help to give you a bit more time and space to be able to breathe.
Yeah, great. Jazz, how about you? You've actually started to put a few of these things in place as well at Innocean, right?
Yeah, we've just put an EAP in place, and I had to do like a critical response because we actually had a tragic accident happen in the agency. So that kind of triggered that, because I actually don't think that many agencies, this is like if you're a big blue chip, you usually have an EAP, and it's part of a global thing. As like independent or smaller agencies sometimes don't even have that. So we didn't have that. I put that into place. For me, this is something that I've encouraged everyone to use, because it's really, really good for them. For me, like people that are mentally stable are just much better performers, just for myself as well, right? So I'm at the best of times anxious, and I feel like, we all need to do what we need to do to be the best person we can possibly be. I read this a little bit different. I read this that this person's stress seems to come from a shitload of work, which is also something that is rife in our industry, right? People being worked into the ground. And if you are feeling so stressed that even the idea of an EAP or the tools that someone's giving you is something that you cannot utilize best, because it's got to make you even more stressed because you can't get on top of your workload, I think it might be time to have a conversation again with your line manager around it, and actually just say, hey, I am not good, I'm not really coping well, so that maybe they can free you up. Because I think sometimes the problem seems to not be the top management, because, people like myself have all got all the best intentions, but there's people sort of in between that necessarily don't know whether it's okay to give someone permission to have a mental health day. There's like not that awareness around that. So I would encourage maybe, again, that you say something about your personal stress levels related to your workload, and maybe that can be alleviated.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one thing that I gave a presentation this morning at an agency, and it's a big thing that we're trying to make more of, which is we're finding more and more leaders have great intentions, but you've actually got to free up the management levels to be able to give them the power to say, yes, have a mental health day, or, look, let's see how we can change your workload, because quite often, unfortunately, it doesn't quite reach that level. And we've seen responses before, which is like, oh, well, your employment contract says that every now and again, you're going to have to work more hours because of the nature of our industry and our business. And it just kind of gets, so tough.
Yeah.
But I think that's where we've got to try and help out a little bit more. Next question is around age and getting a job in the industry. This is to you, Jasmin. So how can a late bloomer, mature age student learn to deal with those unsettled feelings of being older than their peers, but less experienced or skilled in the work?
Isn't that a difficult one, and if this industry is so horribly ageist in the first place, and we're all culpable of that. So first of all, I would say congratulations. You had the courage to pick up another career, which I never had the courage to do. Like, I've been thinking about this also. We all go through that. Once in a while we go, what am I doing? Should I be doing something else? I always wanted to do, I don't know, this psychology degree or become horticulture specialist. and then you never do it. So if you did that and picked that up now, I think that's fucking amazing. So good, right? So good on you for doing this in the first place. And then I would go, so I can't remove the feelings of feeling unsettled. I feel unsettled most of the time, feeling completely out of my depth. So it must, I don't know how that, therefore it must be for someone that's coming new at a mature age into the industry. So I think just sit with it, put your best foot forward. Don't pretend that you're one of the 20-year-olds you're running around. You don't have to. Like, at the best of times, you bring so much to the table when it comes to maturity. You know, in this industry, we also sometimes miss the adults in the room, and you bring really, really valuable insights. And do not forget that we in advertising constantly forget 50%. We forget, first of all, we forget all the women that are making all the decisions, and then also we forget that how much power an older population holds in terms of household spends and insights. So there's a fair chance that you might come in really, really handy in understanding that audience really, really well. So I would probably lean into that and focus on the things that you do bring to the table.
Brilliant.
It has blown my mind thinking about this, Jasmin. When I think about the fashion industry, how long it has taken the fashion industry to even show images of women who are over 30. When, if you think about who has the money to spend and who makes the decisions in the household around what to buy, where to go, the people who have more money are usually people who are a bit older. So I think it's a great loss in the advertising industry, in the creative industry, in all of this. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Actually, I met someone a couple of weeks ago who I said something like 40s. They might even be 50s. Who had just like literally gone to uni to become a graphic designer, and it was awesome to see them at the design conference. See them there, learning with everybody else. And I think the other thing is that you'd be surprised. It is really hard to have those feelings inside around kind of, oh my God, I shouldn't be here. I'm an imposter. But you know what? I think our community is actually pretty open when it comes now to like more and more diverse people coming into our industry, and diversity also comes in age. And I would just like try and embrace every opportunity and assume, it's really hard, assume that people want you to succeed. You know, like it's really easy to assume that people want you to fail, or assume, and it's, you know, we've always got that in the back of our minds. But sometimes if you approach situations assuming that someone else wants you to succeed, it's actually a really nice way of going with things. So yeah.
I think there's a solution to this, right? You know, those horrible 30 under 30 and 40 under 40 and all those, you know, where you just like make everyone feel so inadequate if you haven't achieved something sensational by a certain age, right? That's so shit. I think we're only going to be able to change it really once we introduce, you know, because this industry always reacts to awards so well. So maybe we should be focusing on something like
I'm almost positive that there is and I've seen this.
There
yeah,
is?
Forbes did the 50 over 50 recently. So yeah, maybe we need a bit more of that.
Even if we imagine if we just did just a general sort of like a category where we even celebrated the merits of experience, right? As opposed to not making it age-based, just celebrating sort of the individuals and maybe flipping that on its head, I think would do a lot of good.
Yeah, great. Okay, 1:10. We've got about 15 minutes to go. I can see a question in the chat, so we'll definitely get to that one. This next question I'm going to put to you, Tara, around, and it's around kind of like what you can come across in the work that you do. So the UX industry, so user experience industry, talks about the value of empathy in our work. As researchers, we often find ourselves in dark, heavy topics with participants, but we're not equipped to deal with it like counselors are. How do we look after ourselves during those research projects?
It's so important that if, well, okay, so I'm going to just make an assumption without obviously being in this industry. I feel like you're probably going to know the area that you'll be researching before you start researching it. Is that usually how it works?
It depends. Like, you know, your expertise and your skill set, but often we have to suddenly become experts in another industry or topic in like a few weeks.
Yeah.
So you do get deep really quickly.
Right. Okay. Well, that I guess answers that for me. Thank you for clarifying, because I guess if we're noticing that, I know that some design agencies, for instance, they work more with mental health or wellbeing kind of places, and so when you know that that's sort of the area that you're going to be working in, it's probably a bit easier to do some prep work and being able to have your own therapy and having a really good support network around you. They're the things that are really, really useful, because again, if we think about that Tetris kind of thing, if we're already starting up here and we've only got that little bit left of room to play with, it doesn't take very much for us to completely explode out of the top. So making sure that we're managing our own internal space a lot more effectively and sharpening the saw, if I go back to that analogy, that can be really, really useful. It also helps to widen our resilience window. So if we have a really narrow resilience window and the usual ups and downs that everybody goes through in their day, week, month, year of their life, if we have a narrow resilience window, then there's things that are going to be outside of our capacity to handle more. Whereas if we have a broader resilience window, then there's more space for us to handle the ups and downs better. So that comes from, mindfulness practice, exercise, sleep hygiene, therapy, being in healthy relationships, communication, connecting more, all those real sort of life and living skills. They're the things that really help us to manage our own internal space with that. If you're noticing, so if I just sort of reread that bit, so it says, as researchers, we often find ourselves in dark, heavy topics with participants, but we're not equipped to deal with it like counsellors are. How do we look after ourselves during research projects? So one of the most helpful things that you can do is actually to have a debrief person after each of your interviews, or I'm not sure how this works in terms of the research part, but if you're having like an interview or a workshop with a group of people to understand more, then setting aside a good 30 to 45 minutes to really debrief with someone. So whether that's your HR person, who usually tends to have a few more sort of skills in managing mental health and well-being, it might be even that you call the EAP service and have a debrief at the end of a big day of this research stuff. Like these are what those services are there for. If you're noticing that you're taking things home with you, then this really needs to be communicated to your manager, because, again, from a systems perspective, there can be other ways of creating buffers between you and the details, because just like in group therapy, we encourage people to share, though we don't encourage specifics about a situation because it can be triggering to other people in the room. So in the same way, it's about knowing what level to ask about, and when things are going over that edge, learning strategies to kind of go, yep, okay, cool, we'll just park this here. We don't want to kind of go, here's all the stuff, and then not know how to kind of put yourself back together again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's I think that was the advice we were given in doing circles as well. Like, it's really easy, because also you want to kind of be showing as like really listening and really kind of wanting to understand someone, but actually you've got to be quite careful around your own boundaries. And this is probably, Jazz, where like there is a little bit of responsibility here for the employer, because if you're going to put someone into these kinds of situations, you actually do have to make sure they've got the safety net around them, right?
Duty of care, 100%. I mean, it sounds a little bit like a no-brainer, right? I would feel really horrible to send people into projects where they would be exposed to information that affects them. So I think surely someone that works in that sort of space where it gets quite dark and heavy has to kind of like overcompensate by putting in additional care. I mean, maybe not, but I mean, it should, definitely. I mean, that's for me a must.
Okay, cool. 2 questions left here. One of them, what I might do is, Jazz, as you answer this first one, Tara, you might have a few like very quick bullet points around procrastination habits and how to get over procrastination. So that's coming next, just so that we can answer it fairly quickly.
Sure.
Jazz, this next question says, how do I explain gaps in my CV from mental health and COVID-related breaks and frame a failed job in a positive light? One of my best design projects in my portfolio, a big office signage job for a huge beverages company, pushed me over the edge into a burnout and spiral of depression and led me to quit my job. In hindsight, I was given little support to manage the project, and as a fledgling midweight, was probably too junior to oversee the job. The work was great and relevant to roles I'm trying to get into now. I just never got to see it into production.
Oh, that's not an easy answer to this one. So first of all, this is about gaps in a CV, mental health, and then sort of kind of saying, but also because of that, I don't feel comfortable that I have the right level of work that I can prove to you that I'm capable of doing this job, right? So I think there are 2 different things. So if you're putting yourself forward for an interview or a work that you want to do and you do not have the relevant experience, what you could do is maybe do a little bit of desk research and show them how it's relevant to whatever job you're going for, because I'm sure you have the information. As suits, we do that all the time. Maybe in the creative profession, it's kind of like, just here's my folio, off you go. But I think with then maybe overcoming it with a little bit of proactivity and showing them how you would go about certain things might be a bit of a shortcut there. But I would also say, just assume that when people interview you, they don't necessarily look for faults. They usually just really want to, go into this beautiful new relationship potentially and find someone that's right for the jobs. When I ever interview people, I kind of like go, ooh, I'm quite excited to meet you, and tell me all the great things about you. So maybe that's a really good starting point. I think you will then find in the interview process fairly quickly whether this is a person that would be, again, someone that is the right employer for you. Because this sounds to me also that someone that deals with depression might need an employer that actually is quite empathetic to that. Not everyone is, unfortunately, but maybe that's, again, something that you may want to sort of like, suss out early on, because everyone that's a half decent employer and looks for someone with your skills will understand that, to be honest, depression and anxiety is so rife in our industry. Most people deal with baggage, and it's okay to have a gap in your CV. At least that's my point of view.
Yeah. I think also, you know what, I'm seeing more and more, there's a lot of really good mentoring programs out there at the moment, and people who are offering to be mentors, and actually just like talking this through with someone would be really good. You'll be surprised. Like, all we ever show in our industry is the best work. You'll be surprised how many people have had your experience. I've had that experience. I've had a project that went off the rails, was terrible, knocks your confidence. But then, you know what, it's just one project and you'll get back to it, and you'll have learned so much. And in fact, you'll have learned more on that project than people who have never had that experience. And so it's kind of really important to remember that as you go through. So I would also try and find someone you can talk that through with, and can probably maybe like coach you into looking for work in the future as well. Tara, I can see you've got a few bullet points on procrastination. How do we get over procrastination?
Yeah, it's hi. It's a thing. What I will say is, for me, last year taught me so much about myself. And while I always sort of knew it, last year was like a bomb of the realization of what I'm about to say. Is when you know yourself, and you know that your environment is impactful on where your head is at, then that's a really great place to start. So for me, when I really think back about it, I would do more of my university learning and assignments at the uni library than I would at home, because when I was at the uni library, my brain was on this as a focus. When I had the experience of lockdown and just all these things of having to basically move my whole business into my spare room, that for me was a complete and utter shift in the way that I handle life. Because for me, when I'm at home, I really have boundaries around not thinking too much about, clients or work-related stuff. And the problem is that I was really finding that, I was thinking about clients all the time, or I wasn't really doing the things that I needed to be doing, getting out the emails, doing all that stuff. So I really employed these 3 things into my space, and it's things that I've been recommending to people since the beginning of time, which is firstly, have a totem. So have something that clearly defines when you're at work and when you're not at work. So for someone, when I first started as a psychologist, the thing that I would do is I would wear a watch, because I didn't have my internal timing set up yet. So I would wear a watch. The moment I would get home, I would take my watch off, and then that would be a real kind of disconnect from work brain to Tara brain. I've said to some clients, have a certain set of earrings, that when you're wearing earrings, you're at work. When you're not wearing earrings, you're not at work. Or have a uniform, perhaps it could be that you wear your blazer or your certain pair of pants or whatever it may be. So really having a totem that connects you to whether or not you're at work or not at work. Secondly is setting up a really productive environment. And this can be in terms of switching off, your personal phone. It could be deactivating some of the notifications. These sorts of, like, the productive environment is a very important thing. So actually setting up a desk rather than just sitting on your bed, those sorts of things can be useful. And then finally, actually take breaks, because when we're working from home, we can kind of be breaking and not at the same time. So really taking a proper break is really, really important. And if you need to actually take your earrings out, take your earrings out. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Someone just suggested that this was my work cap. I do think very carefully about the caps I wear for different situations. This is very much a asking for a friend and never not creative cap, for sure. But I do have a lot of them. So I'm worried that Tara, you're going to have to go in the next minute or two. So what we might do is just I want to get this question out, and then perhaps Jazz and I can deal with the last one. So this question says, I'm so scared of making a mistake in my work, and it's really holding me back from putting myself out there. Any advice or tips?
Hang on, let me just read that again. I'm so scared of making a mistake in my work, and it's really holding me back from putting myself out there. Any advice or tips? Okay. When we think about perfectionism, it's usually about having unrealistically high expectations of ourselves or of others. And more often than not, we are the biggest critic that we have in our space. We are that of ourselves. Mistakes are the way that we learn. And as long as we're ensuring that it's not like mission critical risk issues, and even in those sorts of situations, usually there's someone else there that can, mop up stuff. If we don't fall over, we don't actually know how balance works. And think about it in terms of a child. When you look at a child that's learning how to walk, right? They're wobble, 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 fall down. And then what happens to the people around them? They're like, yay, keep going, up you get, come on, you've got this, let's do it again. And then the kid's like, oh yeah, cool, I'll give that another go. And up it stands, and then it tries to kind of make a step, and then the people lose their shit. And then it's like, oh, I'll keep doing that. And then before you know it, it's running around like crazy, and the adults are trying to catch it to stop it from running into a glass door. So this is really what we want to be having in terms of our environment. If you feel that your environment is there to support you in the face planting, like the adults around a newborn that's not a newborn, but like a toddler that's learning how to walk, then make the mistakes, because that's where the learning comes into it. That's where the richness of your experience comes into it. If you feel that your environment is not that space, then is it the environment for you? Because if it's getting in the way of you being able to be your best self, then chances are that that big F word, oh, I can't do F with my fingers, but like if we're not doing our best work, we're probably not going to remain in the job anymore. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to let you go, Tara, because I know you have to prepare for your next client. Thank you so much for joining us in this session.
Thank you.
You've had so many, there's been so many bits of great feedback around the best analogies ever. It's like you have an analogy for every question. I've not heard the sharpening the saw one before.
Oh, really? Yeah. Read the seven healthy habits. Stephen Covey, I think is his name.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you very much. We'll let you go.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. And enjoy the rest of the chat.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jazz, do you have any thoughts on this, making a mistake at work? Like, I think the more junior you are, the more you think, oh my God, if I don't get this right, I might bring down this company, and you know what I mean? Like that does come up. And I've certainly seen that from people. Whereas, once you've been around the block a bit, you kind of know what mistakes you can afford to make. And sometimes it's, very rarely are you going to cause any major upsets.
I think we all make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I think you just got to learn how to be okay with your own imperfections, basically, right? So no one is particularly great at everything. And I think it's also about the recovery. For me, when I go horribly wrong, which might happen, and actually does happen, you might want to investigate why you went wrong. If it's in a junior level and it's just like a task you did wrong, I don't think anyone, that's expected. You're learning on the job. If you do it on a more senior level, maybe it's because you haven't been listening to others. So then I question my leadership style, and I wonder whether I empower everyone to give me their point of view, or whether I just want to hear my own voice, right? So I think it's, for me, something that I would say about not being afraid to make mistakes. And the recovery is to, like, if you did something wrong, people will forgive you if you just say, hey, I'm really sorry, I fucked this up.
Yeah, you know what? And that's such a big thing. Like, you can be, rather than being scared of making a mistake, just make sure that you've always got a solution for it, or that you'll own it. And once you own it, you'll be amazed. I'll never forget, this is a bit odd. When I was really little, a mate of mine, we had these like panes of glass that my dad never put up into something. I don't know what he was going to do with it. And they were just outside the back of our house. And a mate of mine, dared me to throw a stone at it. What an idiot. And so I did, and I smashed the glass, right? And I went in immediately and I told my mum that, oh my God, I just smashed this glass. I'm so sorry. And she went and bought me donuts. And it was like, for me, that was the great example of like owning your mistakes. You know what, I really screwed up here. And I had someone at work actually recently who said they made a mistake, and they came to me straight away and they said, look, here's what I did, but also here's what I'm going to do to fix it. And the biggest thing for me was to know that someone was going to own their mistake and that they were able to kind of do something about it. And so if you want to kind of lose some of the fear and the scaredness, is also be prepared to then own it, and you'll be amazed how much the people you're working with will be grateful for that.
The other thing I would say to this is, like, catastrophizing, like going into like spirals of what could go wrong, is a sign of anxiety, right? So I know when I'm in an anxious headspace, I'm like going through the things of all the things that could go wrong. So I think trying to get yourself out of that is probably also worthwhile considering.
Definitely. Last question then, so we can finish up. Do you have anything that you do personally or recommend to others for relaxing and recharging? I sometimes find it difficult to relax, and I'm trying to build a list of things to do that are a little more creatively stimulating or productive than Netflix.
I'm probably the worst person to answer that, because I struggle with that at the best of times, in particular working from home. You know, I go 12 hours without doing proper self-care sometimes because I'm just so in the thing, because I don't have distractions. Personally, for me, it's exercise. Exercise is for me the stuff that it's my form of meditation, and that's where I'm not connected to devices. No one can reach me, and I'm just by myself. Even if it's just about counting repetitions, or like, you know, if you run a certain distance, just being in that moment is my form of relaxing. That's not creatively stimulating, but it stimulates a different area for me, and it gives me a lot more energy. But it's like such a predictable stock standard answer here that I'm sure that's not what you wanted to hear.
You know what? I think but what it does say is that everyone is different, and everyone has their own things. I think you've got to find what you really love, and you've got to think back to where you felt you're most relaxed. You know, at the moment it's winter, and I love like putting on a fire and just sitting and reading a book next to the fire. I can't do that in summer for some reason. But I've smashed through like 3 books in 3 weeks, and I've found something that, you know, allows me to do that. And like you just said around exercise, like it's, you know, actually it is in a way creatively stimulating, because you're allowed to focus on something else, and that's actually what frees your mind up a little bit. I don't know whether you find like you probably find answers to things that you've been thinking about.
I do, right? You don't even think about things, and an hour later I go, I know exactly what I'm going to do now. So that kind of resolves things for me. And exercise is not for everyone, but maybe just even like, you know, I'm doing some of it's really horrible, but therapeutical cleaning. For me, like, you know, just doing just nonsense that switch my brains off, and like, you know, cleaning the.
Oh, we lost Jasmin, but I think where we're going was do something that works for you. There's a few things you could clean, you could read, you could build a fire. But yeah, hopefully that helps answer that question. Oh, there we go. We're back.
Well, I got kicked out, but anyway, I think you got the
gist.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jazz. It's been brilliant having you. One person did, who knows what's going on there. One person did ask a question about Fuck the Cupcakes, and I have added that in as a link. So go check that out. And I'm sure you can reach out to Jazz as well if you have any questions about that. I want to get involved more. I just plugged Fuck the Cupcakes.
Oh yeah, please plug it.
So the link's there on the end of that question, fckthecupcakes.com. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone. We're back on the first Thursday of next month as well. Hopefully that's helped. This will also go up on the Asking for a Friend page on Never Not Creative, where you can find all of our previous sessions as well. There's lots of great advice and questions and answers in there. That's it for today. That's it for this month. That's it for this month on the 1st of July. Nice. It would be good if we could do that every month. Thanks again, Jazz. We'll speak soon. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.